What's up, y'all? Today is the 29th of October 2025. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In The Image Clothing Company. Welcome to our main side. Okay, there's 4 sides to In The Image Clothing Company, and this is one of our 4. I'll get into it, but let's talk about what let's talk about what we'll be talking about. Let's talk about this. I think we're changing some things up a little bit. What I used to do, pretty much always up until like a day or two ago, was I'd have our intros be where I talk about each of the 4 sides of In The Image Clothing Company pretty deeply. And then I talk about where clothing sits, and then I mention our 2 prerequisites to not alter the body in clothing. And then after that, I'd get into the discussion of what the video was about. But I think, at least for a time, at least for some videos, and maybe going forth, we'll switch it up and not quite intro it like that. Yeah, hoodies. How hoodies affect body mechanics. If you know, In The Image Clothing Company, we word things as that. Body mechanics. The human body is just a mechanical machine placed onto a rock in space. There's only one way it could ever work. There's just a neutral to every position of every joint, right? And there's a center line. The sternum, the spine, the trachea, the nose, and our jaw. The jaw naturally stabilizes not only the head with the musculature from the lower jawbone up to the crown of the head, between the eyes and ears here, but the jaw stabilizes the entire body. On Earth's gravity, there's a center of gravity that our body's centered line has to mesh with. So our clothing has to stay centered, fit correct, and be made from ideally 100% natural materials. Now, this hoodie is not natural materials, at least not entirely. But our bodies are only natural. Natural, neutral, and normal are synonyms within the human being. And we just allow the body to work, right? Through clothing, free modifications, and yeah, we'll always have good clothing. But we talk about eating, sleeping, standing, walking, sitting, breathing, hydration, all the things that we do as a human being, okay? And just how to do things naturally. We just talk about life. We just talk about it, bro. So what I'm gonna talk about in this video is how hoodies affect body mechanics. Okay, because that's the thing, is our bodies are just a mechanical machine placed onto a rock in space. There's only one way they could ever work. Okay, we place clothing on the body and it has to just work for the body the way the body works. Now, the thing with hoodies and these modern designs, a lot of what we have is rotated seams. It's really common for there to be rotated seams in our clothing, tops or pants or anything really. Things that are just new, from decades ago as of today's date, like things being stitched in factories by robots. Just never happened before. It started to, okay? And a lot of what happens is they'll stitch something with a machine, flip it around and stitch it again. And so now you've got a seam rotating like down the arm this way, in toward the body on one side, and then away from the body on the other side. That's what we talk about so often under In The Image Clothing Company, because really what we do is get out of chronic patterning and scar tissue that we get into through oversized clothing, imbalances in clothing, shoelaces and drawstrings, just ropes introduced to the body, potentially rotating the whole thing. And we live in this right-handed world where we get into this right-handed patterning, more externally rotated on the right side, away from the body's center line, okay? Dropped, and then yes, farther away from the body's center line on the right side. We get into this patterning because 85%, give or take, of the earth is right-handed. And so that's what happens with these rotated seams. One of our free modifications we show In The Image Clothing Company's rotated seam modification. Anytime there's seams that are rotated, coming down the armpits of the top, down the sleeve and rotating, on the arms, coming down the sides of our tops and rotating, okay, and then just getting pinned flat at the bottom and stitched into where there's a rotation happening. Well, we're placing that on our bodies and it's rotating our entire bodies, down to the tips of the toes and up to the tip of the head, out to the fingertips, if it's on our sleeves or on our sides, because it's just sitting on us on Earth's gravity, okay? So that's a big thing, is just watch out for rotated seams in hoodies, because they're often there. This design is actually really sweet because it has like this this band of material. Like when I discuss button-ups and I say button-ups have a band of material that naturally sits behind the shoulders, which is great because our top seams need to be behind the peak of the shoulders because our shoulders follow shoulder seams and they only ever work behind our head. The shoulders just connect behind the head, okay? So that's a big thing with hoodies, is watch out for those rotated seams because your whole body will be rotated. And yeah, now we've got videos, right, how sleeve cuffs affect body mechanics, just like how pant cuffs affect body mechanics. Under In The Image Clothing Company's main side, we need to do all that we can to just have freedom of motion in the wrist so that it can have all of its motion without being stuck in one position, okay, from a sleeve just being too long sitting on it. So that's a big thing that happens with any long sleeved top, and a hoodie is one of those, okay, a long sleeved top. But the big thing with hoodies is the designs nowadays, they just don't really work for how the body works. One huge thing with hoodies is there's this pocket. Usually, that's what makes this hoodie design a hoodie, really, is that there's this hood and then there's usually a pocket, right, as opposed to just like a jacket or something. As you can see, if you can tell, I've cut the pocket off of this front part of the hoodie because our bodies are on Earth's gravity, and our pelvis, or our hip structure as a whole, right, where open hips come from, a video under the main side of In The Image Clothing Company. Golly, I'm choking up in this hoodie, no joke. You know, we talk about just the hips and where pants sit and keeping the hips neutral on Earth's gravity. Well, if we have a pocket here and just excess material, it's gonna push our core backward and make our pelvis go anterior, meaning like falling forward, just because there's material in the way of where our core muscles would just contract, okay? And then we could just be vertical on Earth's gravity. So that's one of the big problems with hoodie designs, modern hoodies, similar to what I'm wearing here. If there's a pocket there, well, your muscles can't work. And it's not just about your muscles, because it's about the skeletal system, right? That's what we talk about under In The Image Clothing Company. It's a mechanical machine, and all the muscles do is move the skeletal system. There'd be no reason to have muscles if there wasn't a frame for them to operate. So the body's really just about a positioning, because there's just neutrals to everything. There's only one way the human body could ever work. Our clothing has to be very intentional. So no pockets here, because then you take this nice solid vertical stance and you push it out of its only neutral position, because there's just material that won't allow it to just sit vertical with gravity, truly. That's really, you know, like I say, the biggest thing that we deal with basically as a human being is just gravity, you know, and all the functionality that we do, even sleeping, you know, whatever position we're in, we're just dealing with gravity. That's so much of what we talk about under In The Image Clothing Company is just how are we dealing with gravity through our daily lives, okay? So pockets on the core, no. The core as the whole body can only ever work activated, always, right? The human body only can ever work activated as a whole. It's all there, it just has to work together. You can't drag around dead weight. Everything has a role to play, right? Everything has a neutral position, okay? Pocket on the core, on the abdominal muscles here, right above the pelvis, won't allow that to be. Now, a big thing also with hoodie designs, sometimes, you know, as I say, stretch in clothing. It's only decades old. It legitimately didn't even exist decades ago, and then ever before then, because the unnatural materials that bring stretch with them didn't even exist decades ago from today's date and ever before then. And so these materials often, yeah, bring stretch. And what we'll have a lot of the time is on the sleeve cuffs of the hoodies or around the waistband down here. I guess you'd call that a waistband, like the tail end of the hoodie top, where it goes around your waist. Sometimes we'll have stretch there. Really what I mean by stretch is not so much that it goes away, but that it's contracting in. you know. We can't have that, right? As I say, all musculature, and it's not about me, but this is just the truth of the human being, the only way that it could ever work, designed by God. We're designed in the image of Jesus Christ, right? In the Image Clothing Company. There's only one way their bodies could do anything, and we didn't design it. We can't decide it. An episode title of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, okay? And all musculature in the body just shortens only. Muscles connect from the outside of the shoulder into the center of the sternum in the front on both sides, and from the outside of the shoulder into the center at the spine in the rear on both sides. Okay, arches in the feet grip inward, opposing the center, keeping us vertical on Earth's gravity. We have internal rotation as just half of the function from external rotation, and really that's where the strength is in the body, is as close as we can get to the center line on Earth's center of gravity. So yeah, stretch goes the opposite direction of the only way that muscles could ever work, okay? So yeah, anytime you have stretch in clothing, you're just damaging your whole body. And that happens with these hoodie designs. Usually it's in the sleeve cuffs and it's in the tail end down at the waist, okay? Where that band goes around our waist. We don't want that. We don't want that constricting our hips and altering the way that our hips can work. That alters our whole body. The hips are in the center. We don't want it altering our wrists because that alters our shoulders, right? The hand is essentially the shoulder. Okay. So there's a lot with hoodie designs to actually be very intentional about. And then we've got the hood. Okay. Hoodie. That's where the name comes from. It's because it's got a hood on it. And that's great and that's fine, but we've got these upper trapezius muscles that contract to raise our shoulders up. Okay, well, there's an upper, a middle, and a lower trapezius, all on the back, just doing their functions as they do. Okay, and what they do is hold the shoulders in their only neutral position right at our sides behind our head. Okay, and so they connect to the spine and the rear of the body. If we have this hood on our shoulders, it just needs to be nice and snug around our neck, right? Keeping collars centered. As we talk about under In the Image Clothing Company, we've got In the Image Clothing Company's dreaded collar seam modification. We talk about the same thing for dogs under In the Image Clothing Company poodles, one of our fourths. Keeping collars centered, well, if you've got this hood and it's not tied like mine is here with the rope that goes around it, then it can just kind of like flop off to the side. But we've got musculature, the upper trapezius muscle, that's where that hood is, right? From the shoulder here on the top / rear of the shoulder, across that, connecting to the spine of the neck and the very base of the rear of the skull on both sides of the body. And there's one on both sides of the body, an upper trapezius muscle opposing the center line. And what it needs to be able to do, meaning that muscle on either side of the body, is contract evenly. And so if there's a lot of play in the hood of our top, well, that's essentially like not keeping collars centered with just even a t-shirt, okay? Where if there's play in our collar, then the musculature and the tendons going through the neck up to the jaw, which is supporting the entire body, and holding the shoulders even, which are the hands, right? And then down to our toes and throughout our whole body will just be imbalanced because there's just more weight on one side if the hood is uneven, and it's just pulling on one side of the musculature of our neck and not the other side. And so, you know, then we'll just not be able to be even and centered, okay? And so that's what's beautiful about having this little rope around the hood, is you can tie it. And then you can have the hood sit closer to your neck where your musculature, just as you can see happening here, contracts to, right? Because if the hood is open and wide on our shoulders, it's just going to pull down on our shoulders, put us into external rotation, collapse our feet arches from the hood of our top around our neck. Yeah, okay. So we want everything nice and snug, right? Clothing has to fit. Clothing is the only fix to human beings' physical problems. I know that sounds like I'm making a claim, but it's the only thing physically placed on us. We're just a mechanical machine. Things just need to be able to work, okay? And so, yeah, when we have this hood, it's great to have it nice and close to our neck, okay? Now, I'll actually untie this because I want to show this. This is a big problem. And this just started happening, I feel like, and maybe not, maybe it's been a few decades, I don't even know how long, but I've noticed this, and it's a big problem. Within hoodies, do you see how I'm like, I have to like really try to take a breath? This hoodie is pulling down on me, and it was pulling down on me less so when this knot was tied in the rope to kind of cinch it closer to the center line of my body and allow the musculature in and through my neck to be activated, right? Because that's another thing with this top is, as we say, the edge seams of our shoulders need to be as close as we can get right to the functionality of the shoulder joint, just because it's a joint of both material and body parts, okay? So these sleeves are okay in length, okay? It's my size lengthwise at the sleeve cuffs, but the shoulder seam, just because of the design, is like, what, 5 inches probably at least off of my shoulder. And so I'm having to really hold up my hoodie while it's on me, rather than just allowing my body to be in its only neutral position, okay? The natural scapula position, a video under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company, right? We can't be pulling down on our shoulders. Oversized clothing makes life hard, right? Capital letters and all the letters of the word hard in that video. But it's pulling and straining on my throat and my neck. That's one thing I was going to say a few minutes ago, and I didn't feel like it was quite time to say it yet in this video. So often with modern hoodie designs, the sleeve is just, you know, it's weird. The edge seam of our top of the hoodie, right? I mean, you hear me talking about the edge seams of our top so much. Look, I'm grabbing these ropes to try to like keep my shoulders up because it's really bad. You know, it just pulls down on your musculature that just only can ever contract to work. Otherwise, it's just being damaged and pulled on, right? Chronic patterning and scar tissue, yeah, shoulders being pulled down on because just the design. Because this would technically be my size of a hoodie. Look, my wrists can move, my hands can move, even down at my sides. Well, the sleeve cuffs sit pretty well right where they should. Pretty well. I mean, really they do. But it's just the actual measurement of the length of the sleeve versus the width of the top before you get to that edge seam of the shoulder. It's just so far off of our shoulders with these designs. So common to see in hoodies. I mean, look how far down these shoulder seams are when my shoulders are clear up here, legitimately 5 inches at least. I mean, seriously, that's yeah, not good, right? For the body, there's only one way our shoulders could ever just move, and they can't when the seam material isn't where the seam of the, well, seam of the shoulder is, or the joint of the shoulder functionality, okay? But what we've got, what I was starting to say before I talked about the edge seams of the shoulders in this hoodie, is this little uneven stitch in our neck here, okay? Keeping collar centered, like I'm saying, human beings and dogs. We talked about it on In The Image Clothing Company Poodles, with dog collars, leashes, harnesses, human beings with our collars, okay? This is uneven, and we're speaking right here, okay? In our voice box here in our neck, okay? The trachea is one of the things I mentioned as being the center line of the human body in the intros, and when I just talk about wherever I do, I guess, not necessarily just in intros, that there's a center line of the human body, okay? And right there, if we put pressure against this collar of our hoodie, when this seam is just uneven, then what we're doing is we're going to put our bodies out of their centered position just because we're pressing against something that's imbalanced, if you can see this. Okay, blunt, bold, raw, real, In The Image Clothing Company, right? Shout out to the surrounding sounds because they're here. So what I do here is you can modify this, you know, and you can cut this so that these meet in the center, right? You can cut a little bit off this front left flap here and a little bit off this rear right flap here so that they can meet right in the center. And then when we just have it against our neck, it's just right in the center rather than being off like this, right? This just will never allow your neck to even be in the center of your body on Earth's center of gravity, because it's just going to pull differently and actually into a right-handed patterning. This is exactly what I mean, right? The right-handed world is within this hoodie design, where the hood part comes up and is stitched unevenly like this, where the right side's behind and the left side's in front. The right-handed world. Truly, that's what I mean when I say clothing patterns in themselves are to a degree right-handed. Even if you're left-handed, you live in a right-handed world in all the ways that we discuss it and all the ways that it is. This is one of them, okay? So what I do is take the left side of this hoodie string and tie it over the right, okay, and tuck it underneath, because then it's now opposing. If you can see what I'm showing here, as you tie this a little bit tighter, it's opposing the unevenness to that meeting of the left and right sides of that hoodie collar, I guess, if you will, right? So take the left string or whatever one's in front, put it over the one that's in the back. Oh, there you go. You can just see what's happening. It just makes it more even, because it's just doing the opposite thing that the uneven stitch there is doing, okay? And then I just tie it, right? So you go left over right, and then we'll take the right on the next time around and go over the left, right? Just like when we're tying shoes, just go opposite each time. Call it a square knot, if you will. And it just stays tight, okay? So there you go, right? Because then now when you pull, it'll be more horizontal, because the seam will be going one way and then the knot will be going the other way, so they kind of balance each other out, and then it's horizontal. And then, yeah, now you've got it nice and snug around your neck. And none of this is fashion, you know. I'm not trying to show you like fashion tips. I was gonna say by In The Image Clothing Company, but I don't even want to say that together, because no, we don't worry about fashion. We're about the human body. You know, we give universal, eternal information that applies to every human on the face of the earth about the anatomy and functionality of our human bodies, and the only way that they can do that, and then how to allow them to stay like that when we place clothing on us, and then just going through life as well. You know, we know how the body works, and that's our focus. Letting dogs stay natural under In The Image Clothing Company poodles, and allowing the body to work under the main side of In The Image Clothing Company, okay? 2 of our fourths. So, yeah, man. And then, yes, In The Image Clothing Company podcast with discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ, and In The Image Clothing Company music, where we do a lot through music for the body, but then also just music-wise, geared around the gospel of Jesus Christ with any messages through music, okay? We're on episode 173 of In The Image Clothing Company podcast, by the way. Check it out. It's awesome, man. Deep insights on life. You don't have to be religious, but we're all in the same place here, man. God designed it. So we discuss Jesus Christ as he says that he is, okay? So check it out. Hoodies. Now we got the collar pretty well centered. We understand the hoodie shouldn't be pulling down on our shoulders, and so if we can get, when I say the hoodie, I mean the hood. If we can get that as close as we can get it, really, to our neck here, centered around it, to keep our musculature contracted to the center line of our bodies. We talked about sleeve cuff lengths. We talked about how it's just common in design to have the edge seams too far off the shoulders. And that's common in a lot of designs nowadays for tops, okay? But there's only one location where the bones meet and create a shoulder joint, okay? That's where the edge seams need to sit. Like we talk about when we talk about where clothing sits, under In The Image Clothing Company, especially on the main side. That's, you know, this is where we discuss this stuff the deepest out of each of our fourths. Yeah, ideally keeping tops waisted, you know, we talk about that. You have only one location where your hips will hinge, and we need our tops to end as close as we can get to there, which this does well, you know. No stretch, ideally, and those are the big things. There you go, you know. Doing all you can to keep the shoulder seams behind your shoulders. You know, we talk about that. The shoulders only ever work behind the head. And then if you do these things to scrunch, if you will, you know, scrunch up the hood, okay? The hood around your neck, then that'll allow it to sit behind your shoulders better. Than if it's just open and falling. It'll just, you know, the seams might just kind of fall in front of your shoulders or just unevenly. okay? But there's only one way the human body could ever work. And I think that's just about all we need to say about hoodies, okay? There you go. I mean, I think that we're gonna structure things quite a bit differently as time progresses than we have up until now, okay? There's just times and places for things. And this is not how videos have looked quite up until now, right? A little over a year into In The Image Clothing Company as of today's date. So anyway, stick around for the poodles, check us out. There's what you need to know about hoodies. Don't believe me, don't do anything just because I say so, but we just discussed how the body works, and there you go. That's what I'll say. That's all we need to say about this for this video right now. So thank you. Today is the 29th of October, 2025. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In The Image Clothing Company, in this for life. Stick around for the poodles. Check out events here in the state of Utah, the United States of America. This is where we're based and always will be. There you go. Be intentional about your hoodies. Right now, you know, you could be watching this at any time ever, but right now it's fall time in Utah, and it gets cold in the winters. It's getting colder. A couple nights ago, it was like shockingly cold for the time of year. It's definitely the coldest night of the year so far. So, right, hoodies are a very common thing around this time, at least, to wear. But also, if they're damaging your body, they're damaging your body, okay? We give information that just applies to everybody on the face of the earth. When I talk about where clothing sits, I say man, woman, tall or short, skinny or fat, any age, any part of the earth, any time period to ever be. You're just a human being. Your clothing has to sit, and then I discuss it, right? So check us out. Check out what we do. Thank you, and a third. Thank you.